resources to help them bring inner visions to life. His work has been showcased on 5 different continents, has a YouTube channel of 25,000, and has consulted within 5 Fortune 500 companies such as Principal Financial Group. He is dedicated to showing entrepreneurs and business owners the inner and external tools to be outwardly and inwardly successful despite the volatile environments around them. Please welcome both Linda and Jared as they speak about burnout and provide us some very useful tools for this.
Hey, Josefina, thanks for the introduction. Everyone, I just want to start off here. If you could turn on your cameras, that would be lovely. Some of you may be in different situations, but if you're willing, we'd love to see your face, all of your lovely faces. Beautiful. Sarah, Julie, Beth. Hey, everyone. This is great. It's good to see you guys. Well, I'm really honored to be here. I'm really excited to share some of the information that Linda and I have around burnout. Burnout is hands down one of the most powerful things happening in the world right now with COVID. It's causing a lot of healthcare costs. It's impacting people's personal and professional lives. We've all been working within this environment with COVID for the last year. And one of the challenges that Linda and I have seen right from the start is this boundary between personal life and professional life has completely blended together. And defining those boundaries gets trickier. Relationships get trickier. And so what we've seen since we've started our work, especially since COVID has happened, is that the personal lives and professional lives have blended together, and it's making managing relationships a little bit more challenging. It's making navigating life, both personally and professionally, a little bit more challenging. So what Linda and I are going to get into within the next hour is we're going to allow you to see what the causes of burnout are, some of the symptoms, and then also how you can prevent it from happening. We're going to make this fun. We're going to make this interactive. Linda and I are not fans of doing death by PowerPoints. So I want to say that up front. So we encourage and invite you to participate and be along. And we're excited to get into this. So Linda, I'll let you kick it away.
Okay, so do you have our PowerPoint up for us? Or are we going to go ahead and just go through it?
Yep. So can everyone see my screen here? Just want to make sure everyone can see this by show of hands. Got a couple. Awesome.
Perfect.
Great. Let's get into it.
And so one of the things that I wanted to do with you before we really get into it is if you wouldn't mind in the chat box sharing a little bit with us about who you are, what you're hoping to learn today, and what agency you represent. We'd like to know who it is that's tuning in for our presentation today. And so that would be great. And as you're thinking about the topic today, do you feel like you're currently experiencing burnout? And if you are, then you are in good hands today. We're going to be really talking to what it is and the things that you can do so you can head it off before it strikes. And so some of the things that we're going to talk about may be those aha moments. And so we want you to take those insights and really think about how you could take those and apply them. And so you're not headed towards burnout. You're going to be heading towards thriving and doing well in everything that you're doing, both your personal and your professional life.
Beautiful. And Linda, I'm glad you brought that point up. It's easy to get caught up in the information that we're sharing. Information is valuable, but the insight is what's really valuable. As we go throughout this presentation, I encourage and invite everyone not to just look at the information that we're sharing, but look at the personal insights that you're getting when you're seeing and observing the information and taking it in. A lot of the times we miss personal transformations for ourselves because we're focused on the information and not the insight that the information is activating. So as we go throughout this, I encourage and invite you to look at the insights that you'll be receiving as we go throughout the entire presentation. So the number one issue faced by entrepreneurs, Linda, do you want to go ahead and do this slide?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So you can see here right on this screen, you've got that card doing that burnout. The reason why that is there is because burnout is something where you're constantly spinning your wheels and not going anywhere. And so that is a visual reminder of what burnout can look like, in case you were wondering. And so according to the Gallup poll, 23% of employees report feeling burnout, and that's very often or always. And so that's a high percentage there. Well, an additional 44% reported feeling it sometimes. And so the other point I wanted to make is that employees who frequently experience work burnout are 63% more likely to take a sick day and 23% more likely to visit the emergency room. And that one right there is startling to me. You don't want to be going to that emergency room. We don't want to see you there. And so please think about all the things that we're bringing to the table today and see what you can do differently. And one of the things I wanted to mention before we go on to the next piece is if you experience observationally somebody that might be going through burnout, please make sure that you're speaking to that, because that is so important in making sure that we're taking care of everyone. And so in addition to these other two statistics, what can also happen in the workplace is that when people are overstressed and they're underappreciated, that can also lead to chronic stress. And those costs are passed on to organizations, and that can be as much as 30% of the annual salary. That's 1/3.
What we would like to see, just for everyone in the group, is as we go through some of these next slides, we'd like to see you just take in the information and see exactly if you have some of the symptoms. Burnout is this pervasive, invisible force that starts very, very early. I've burned out probably 3 times in my career. I'm only 31, but when I first started working at the age of 14, I didn't realize, no one had ever told me about burnout. And so as we go into this and we cover some of the symptoms, ask yourself, do I have burnout? Have I ever had these signs and symptoms of burnout? And how can I become more aware of burnout right from the start? Because just like anything else, it starts very, very subtly. It's a very, very subtle experience. But the quicker that you can catch it, the quicker that you can take those preventative actions that you need. We don't want to end up in the emergency room, like Linda said. We don't want to end up taking a lot of sick days and feeling like we're just making it through the day. Has anyone had the experience here where they start their day and in the beginning of the day, they say to themselves, oh man, I need a vacation. Has anyone had this experience? Okay, couple. More on Mondays. Yep. So we want to be aware of this. That's just one little sign and symptom of burnout. The quicker that we can catch it, the sooner that we can catch it, the better experience we'll have of our personal and our professional life, and we'll be able to enact those preventative measures. That's why we're all here. That's what this class is about. So you don't get to that point where it becomes something that's going to cost you a lot, both personally or professionally. Let's get into the next slide here. 2 types of burnout. Linda, do you want to take this one as well too?
Sure, absolutely. So there's 2 different types of burnout. And so there's circumstantial, and that is all about the burnout that stems from workplace challenges, neglect of personal life, not taking off. So it's a particular point in time where you might feel burnout. So it's a more temporary time. And then existential is a little bit different. What it is it's the loss or meaning of one's profession. It could be the lack of self-validation, the loss of understanding of professional identity. And here's one that during the pandemic, the loss of connectivity with your colleagues and clients. So you can see that the second one here is one that can be a little longer lasting. And it isn't just in that moment, it's something that's been coming up and is an issue. And that's the one that we really want to tackle. Because if you're feeling like that disconnection and that loss of meaning in your profession, you know what? You got to figure out what it is that's causing that, because what you're going to end up doing is you could switch jobs, but you could carry those same habits of how you would get to burnout in those particular roles. So switching your job isn't necessarily going to change your burnout until you identify the root causes of why it is that you're experiencing that.
Absolutely. And I just want to address some of the comments here. I'm seeing some questions. Allison says, can circumstantial burnout eventually become existential? Absolutely. In fact, existential burnout always starts off as circumstantial. And one of the things that Linda and I see is we see individuals thinking that they need to change careers. They think, oh man, I'm really tired. I'm exhausted. I'm feeling burnt out. I don't know what's happening. I just need some sort of change. You guys ever had this experience where you feel like that something needs to change, but you're not necessarily sure what it is? It may be a change of relationship or a change of business. Have you guys ever had this experience? Couple? Okay. Yep. So what that is that's a sign of burnout. I've coached individuals who've changed their career every 2 or 3 years, and they thought it was because it was something outside of them. They thought it may have been a boss, or they thought it may have been the environment. But really what it was is they didn't know how to manage their energy system. They didn't know how to manage burnout that they were experiencing. They didn't have the tools and the skill sets to do this. And so a lot of times we might interpret those early signs of circumstantial burnout as, I need to make a career change or switch, when all it is maybe you just need some time off. Maybe you just need to take a little bit of a break. And sometimes that takes courageousness and asking your boss, hey, I just need some extra time off, and so I can be more productive for you when I come back. And sometimes that's all it is. I'm going to look at some of the other questions here. We have Rebecca. Rebecca says, start the day totally energized and enthusiastic. That lasts about 30 minutes. ... question mark maybe. Yeah, Rebecca, I've totally been there. And I think anyone who's on this call has probably been there as well too. You can start off the day really, really excited and motivational. Then you're 30 minutes into it and an hour into it, and you start seeing yourself crash down like an airplane. That's perfectly normal in circumstantial burnout. Circumstantial burnout, that's an experience of it right there. Circumstantial burnout it's lighter, it's not as intense, but you just feel like you could be doing more. You feel like your wheels aren't hitting the ground. You feel like maybe you're busy, but you're not being productive. Those are all those signs of burnout. We'll get deeper into those in the presentation. Existential burnout, that's the type of burnout that's more serious, where you feel like there's a loss of meaning in your life. Maybe you were really passionate about your career in your job before, but then it got to a point where you realized, I just don't know if this is worth doing. Is this really helping anyone? Has anyone asked themselves these questions? Am I really supporting anyone in the world? Is my work worth doing? That's existential burnout. When you're coming from a place where the meaning of your existence is questioned, that's how you know you really need to take a break. That's a really big sign and symptom that you need to start slowing down, when there's that loss of actual personal meaning and fulfillment. Beautiful. Let's continue on here. We'll get to the next slide. Linda, I'm going to have you take off the next slide, and then I'll take the 12 steps to burnout, but we'll finish up this one for now. So point number 2 under existential is hard to separate business from self.
And so it's really hard to separate business from self. That's something that can happen. And during the pandemic, I'm sure that a lot of us have felt that way. And personally, from the whole online schooling, if you have school-age kids, that one there is hard. And it's also hard when you're trying to shut down for the night, right? So one of the quick tips I just wanted to pass on that I thought was really amazing is that sometimes it's just a matter of being able to actually physically take that computer and shutting it physically, and taking that office and shutting that door. So those are some things that we're going to be speaking to. And so one of the other things that research shows is that, the dissatisfaction, the absenteeism, the inefficient decision-making, turnover, health-related issues, those are other types of burnout. And so when you are not taking that time to rest and rejuvenate and to understand that it's not good for us to keep going until we drop, then you are not going to be in that space mentally where you can make really good decisions about your personal health and hygiene. You're not going to make good decisions in the workplace or in the businesses that you're running because you're not going to be in that space. And so it's really important that we find those things that are going on and really find out how we can turn it off. And one of the greatest things you can do is reaching to other people for support, to ask them to help you to take on some things so you don't run yourself into the ground.
Beautiful. And I'm going to just read a couple of the questions here. So we have, let's see. Oh, wow. These are great questions. So someone says, what do I do if my work is at home? How do I get away from that? Yeah, Celeste, that's a great question. So what I found, and this can be different for everyone. For me, I go for a walk around my neighborhood when I feel, because my personal and professional life is always together, being an entrepreneur, and anyone who's ever done entrepreneurial work here, I'm sure you can relate and understand that. But like Linda said, once COVID happened, we got to a point where our personal and professional lives all blended together. And so with that, we need to discover new ways of ourselves to separate. We need to define for ourselves new boundaries to separate personal from professional life. So however you do that, that's up to you to decide. For me personally, I go for a walk around my neighborhood real quick. I say hi to my neighbors. I just go for a 15 or 10-minute walk. Sometimes I might do that twice a day. And then I get back behind my computer, start making the calls and reaching out to other individuals. I found that to be really decompressive. I see other people are saying that they walk their dogs. So whatever works best for you, that's totally your decision. I found walks is a really big, common one that helps me to decompress. And if anyone has any other suggestions that they want to share, please feel free to put it up in the chat box. I think that would be really supportive for everyone else in the group as well too. Beautiful. Let's keep getting moving here. So there's a couple other things that we want to look at, and we want to look at what the causes of burnout are. And Linda, I want you to do this one if you will. I think that would be lovely. So what are some of the causes of burnout is really valuable to identify, just because it's that preventative care. Remember, we don't want you to get into the hospital, have a heart attack or something like this. We want to prevent burnout right from the start. So what are some of the causes of burnout? Linda, do you want to take this one?
Absolutely. And so one of the first ones is that lack of autonomy. So being able to be in that space where you can guide the decisions, you can guide your path. That's really important to be able to do that. And sometimes what can happen in the workplace is that there's this thing that happens called micromanagement. We've never heard of that word. So when there's micromanagement in the workplace, whether it was intended or not, it can be a problem if you're really trying to navigate that space and, trying to figure out, how to show up and how you're going to enter that. That can be really difficult. And so that's one instance of burnout. And then another one.
Boundaries.
The boundaries, there we go. I just was waiting for that to pop up there. So lack of boundaries. This is a really big one. Not only are we talking about the boundaries from the work life being blended during COVID, but there's boundaries that happen really in the workplace too. And so one of the things that I like to talk to is being able to make sure that you have that protected time and that you're communicating that to the people that you work with, because you can get burnt out when you're trying to honor the requests and customer things that they need, if you are not putting some boundaries on when you're open to having that office time, when you can actually deliver and you say yes to everything and not be thinking about whether or not you have the capacity to do that thing and when you can do it, that can be a real cause of burnout that I see quite often, both in the workplace and then in professionally.
Beautiful.
Engagement. Yep. Now this one's an interesting one because there's two sides of engagement. There is too much engagement where you're saying yes to everything and not saying no. But then there's also a lack of engagement. So needing to be around people, needing to be productive in a way that you're adding value to the mission that you're serving. And so you can feel burnt out from both lack of energy and, overdrive. And then the next one, motivation. Okay, so we all are motivated in different ways. And so that, again, is really like the engagement. You can be really motivated to do something. And what I see a lot is that there's this mentality that you can always keep going. We all have the same number of hours in the day. And so we need to maximize those hours and do every single thing. And when you put yourself into that place where you're not resting, you're not taking breaks, and you're not turning things off, then you can be very motivated to do those things. But if you're not doing the rest and recovery piece, you're going to burn out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just want to add to that, Linda, because the motivation and passion piece are very similar here. One of the biggest misconceptions that I see in the entrepreneurial world and also in the work world is that if you're really passionate about something, then you can work endlessly. I do believe, and the research would support this, that if we are passionate and excited about something, we can go for longer hours and we can work more. That being said, we don't have infinite amount of energy. We have a body, we're grounded, and our body can only go for so long. And sometimes what I see with entrepreneurs especially, but also some individuals in the professional workplace as well, and senior executive leadership, they'll say, I'm really passionate about this, so I should be able to work on it till 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning. And that's not necessarily true. Yes, passion is awesome. It helps us get excited and helps us to make our work exciting, and there's more fluidity in our work. That being said, it's not the end all be all. You can still reach burnout. And a lot of the times when I've coached entrepreneurs or senior executives, I see that they have this belief system that passion itself is enough. We want to honor our body. We want to honor our mind, our spirit, take those breaks that we need. And we can still be passionate about something, but give ourselves a little bit of a break. And so we want to honor all aspects there. Beautiful. Let's keep moving forward. So Linda, you want to take this?
Yeah, and so we have one of our questions that we wanted to put out to all of you. And so what life occurrence contributes to your own burnout? Do you know what that is, and you can articulate it and share it with us?
So we encourage you, if you have any thoughts or insights around this, what life occurrences contribute to that burnout, please feel free to share it in the chat and we'll bring it up here on screen. I love that. So Beth says having to cook dinner every day. Hey, if you're feeding a family, that's no joke. I grew up in a family of six other brothers and sisters, and I don't know how my mom did it. Luckily, my dad was working and my mom could stay at home and take care of us. And yeah, that'll do it. Having 6 kids to feed, needing to be a primary caregiver while working, that's a lot of responsibility, Cynthia. I acknowledge you for taking that on. Schooling your son. This is another big one that we've seen since schools have shut down. Suddenly we had, for you, those of you who are parents on the call, all the family moved in, and it's like suddenly you have to take care of your family, feed them, school them, a lot more responsibilities. Absolutely. Getting closer to retirement or just wanting to retire. That's a good one, Linda. Yeah, once you're close to retirement, it's like senioritis. Courtney says, I have 2 small kids at home while working and husband works out of the house. Yep. Working from home while 8 months pregnant with 2 toddlers. Wow, Kate. Everyone who's sharing, I really want to acknowledge you for the roles that you're playing. I think a lot of the times we don't have people acknowledge the roles that we're playing, but I think that's also really important. We do need that validation and that external acknowledgement. Being human can be hard and difficult and challenging at times. A lot of us are all playing different roles, roles of business owners, roles of senior executive leaders, roles as parents, roles as uncles, brothers, sisters. We play so many different roles as being human. And I think a lot of times we just need to have compassion for ourselves and recognize how many roles we're really playing. I was just talking to a woman the other day. She's a business owner. She's trying to be the best business owner that she can be. She's trying to be the best wife that she can be. She's also trying to be a great parent and raise 2 kids. And she came to me and I just told her, I said, I understand how stressed you are, but I want to acknowledge you for playing all these roles and you're doing a great job. And I can see that you're doing the best that you can. Sometimes that's all we need to hear. And so genuinely from my heart to yours, I hope you can take this in. All the roles that you're playing, they deserve to be acknowledged because it's no joke playing as many roles as we are playing in this modern society. Beautiful. And I'm not going to be able to get to all the comments because we got to continue on here. But for everyone who's sharing, I want to acknowledge you for all the roles that you're playing. Awesome. So let's get a little bit further into the presentation. We're going to get a little bit more granular here, and we're going to go into the 12-step model to burnout. So there's this model that was invented by Herbert Freudenberger and Gail North. They're both psychologists, and they did research on burnout for the last 2 decades. And their model of burnout helps us to understand exactly the process to it. Because remember, burnout starts very, very subtly. We're not aware of it from the beginning. It's a very, very subtle process. And so we want to be aware of it from the beginning and from the end so we can see where we're at in the burnout process. And so while you're watching this and taking this in, I encourage you to invite yourself to ask yourself, where am I in this model? Where am I in the level of burnout looking at this Freudenberger North model? It's Freudenberger, that's fun to say. So the first thing that I see is compulsion to prove oneself, demonstrating worth excessively. I see this in the startup world. I've coached some startup companies and they feel like they need to prove themselves in the market. I see it with individuals also right from the start. Some individuals who are getting into a new career or a new job, they feel like they need to prove themselves over again. So they push, go, and go. So I encourage and invite you to ask yourself, do I have a compulsion to constantly prove myself, whether it's in my professional life or even in my personal life? You ever get in a relationship and you're like, oh man, I got to prove myself to their whole new family. I love this woman or I love this man, and their whole family is, they're probably, evaluating me this week. And I've recently had this experience within the last 3 months where I'm like, oh, I'm coming into a family and I got to feel like I'm, doing a really great job and that I'm worthy of proving my worth to the family, that I can betroth their daughter. So that's an experience that everyone experiences, not just professionally, but also personally as well too. So I encourage you not just to look at your professional life, but also look at your personal life. Look at your personal life and see where it is that you're demonstrating your worth. Sometimes people do this as parents. Sometimes they're like, oh, I'm a new mother or I'm a new father, and I really want to make the best for this for my child. My parents, when I look at, they had 6 kids. I got 5 other brothers and sisters. Right from the start, we saw, I was the second in line. We got a lot of attention, and like my parents didn't want to screw it up, so we got disciplined a lot. By the time that they got to my sisters, Faith and Glory, who were the last 2, they kind of let them do their own thing. And so this compulsion to proving oneself doesn't just exist in the professional world; it also exists in our personal life as well too. So we want to be aware of that. Number 2, working hard with an inability to switch off. Once again, with COVID, always having the laptop open, always having your cell phone on. We live in a day where now the email, it's like Facebook Messenger, a constant access. So your energy always going out into the world. We want to shut those things off. When our personal and professional lives blend, it can be hard to get away from your email, especially when everyone has a smartphone and you get the notification right there. I encourage you to draw those boundary lines, and I encourage you to have courage And that's what encourage means, getting encouraged. I encourage you to be courageous with drawing those boundaries. If you need those boundaries with your family, draw them. If you need those boundaries with work, draw them. Don't be afraid to do that. And if you are afraid, that's okay. That's a part of it. Do it anyway. It's for your own well-being and your own enjoyment of life. Number 3, neglecting basic needs, a lack of eating, a lack of health, and a lack of social interaction. This is the third thing that starts coming in. For me, if I ever get into moments where I'm overworking too much, I start to see, wow, I haven't really eaten that much today. Or wow, I haven't reached out to my father or my mother or the people who are closest to me or some of my brothers. I need to do that. And so that's the third sign here. If you start seeing that you're kind of isolating, closing down, that's a good sign that you're avoiding what you need to be aware of. Let's get into number 4 here. Number 4 is a displacement of problems. Problems are dismissed. Do you guys see this one in the workplace? So everyone just starts throwing responsibility at each other. Oh, you get a new responsibility to come in. Oh, I don't want to deal with this right now. I'm tired. I'm going to throw this over to Cindy, or I'm going to throw this over to Karen, or I'm going to throw this over to Gina. You just throw a problem the other way because you don't actually want to deal with it. And that's normal. I see this for some cultures, that's built into the actual culture of the workplace. I was working within one company recently, and I could see everyone was just trying to throw responsibility off to each other, just displace it because everyone just felt so overburdened. So we want to be aware of how we're displacing our problems. And when we see ourselves displacing responsibility, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it tomorrow, or I'm just going to give it to this person. That's a sign that we're getting a little bit more burnt out. I'm going to look at Linda's comment here. Linda says, time management is very important while working remotely. I'll notify my team to let them know short periods I'm not available via email so I can focus on something I'm working on. It helps to cut down the stress of having to reply to incoming emails. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, time management and energy management, all of it. When I look at managing, I don't just look at time management. I look at emotional management. I also look at energetic management because we only have so much mental energy or thought energy we can use in one day. And we only have so many emotional decisions we can make as well too. And we'll get into decision-making fatigue a little bit later on in the presentation here. It's just important to be aware of these as well too. All these managing, not just managing time, but managing emotion and managing our thoughts as well. We only have so many thoughts and emotions that we can experience in any given day. Number 5, a revision of values. So values are skewed, friends and families dismissed, hobbies become irrelevant. It's really important to recognize when this starts happening. If you start losing your hobbies, if you start losing that sense of connection with your family and friends, that's a sign that you're getting closer from circumstantial burnout to existential burnout. So in the beginning, remember, it's just circumstantial, but then we're moving closer eventually to existential. Denial emerging of problems, intolerance, perceiving collaborators as stupid, aggression, and cynicism. Problems are caused by work. Remember, that's that displacement. For me, I know being an entrepreneur, and if anyone, I'm sure there's some of you who've been entrepreneurs or who are doing entrepreneurial work, if that comes up for you, intolerance or perceiving other people as not being capable or as competent, those issues and challenges start coming up as we get deeper into the burnout. I'm going to read a couple of the questions here because I think they're valuable for the group. Karen says, is procrastination considered displacement? I would definitely say it would be. There's 2 types of displacement onto another person, and then there's displacement onto another person or a technology or to another future period in time. Like when people tell me, oh, I'm going to get that done tomorrow, or I'll do that on Tuesday, I always feel into, do they really mean that? Or do they actually just like putting something off because they don't feel like they have the capacity to do this today? And so I would look at displacement as putting it off on other people, avoiding responsibility, but also as putting it off in time and putting it off into the future. That's a great question. Jacqueline says, will you be sending out this PowerPoint? Absolutely. We will make sure the PowerPoint gets out to everyone so you can review this. Josefina, do you mind if we send it to you and you could share that with the group? Would that work for you?
Yes, yeah, and we are able to post it normally, I believe, too. Those that can do that can correct me if I'm wrong, but normally we do post our information online as well, so.
Perfect. Great. Thanks. Thank you, Josefina. Awesome. There you go. So there's all different ways that we can be aware of burnout, and we're going to keep getting into it a little bit deeper because there's more to it. Seventh sign is withdrawal. So social life is small, almost non-existent. There's hard social contacts, odd behavioral changes. Has anyone seen a family member experience this? Maybe you had a family member who took on a new job. Maybe they took on a higher level of responsibility. I've seen this with some people when they take on new levels of responsibility and they're adapting that newer level of responsibility, things start to change. I remember I coached one woman who works in San Francisco at the Presidio Theater. She moved up from a regular entry level position. She eventually made it to director. And when she got hired to creative director, everything shifted. She lost some of her hobbies. She lost some of her relationships, and she came to me and we started working around it. And I told her, I said, you know, these are normal parts of taking on more responsibility. Eventually, you'll get into this higher level of responsibility, and you'll be able to manage this role and bring back your hobbies. You're just learning how to manage these new higher levels of being. And so, if you see this, if any of you are taking on new responsibilities, and you're taking on new levels of, leadership, it's normal for some of these things to come up. It's normal for some of these challenges to come up. You will level out. It may take some time. And I encourage you to get the support that you need. Work with a mentor, work with a coach, work with someone who can help you integrate these changes. That's a part of life, taking on deeper levels of responsibility. You don't have to go it alone. Eighth one, depersonalization, not seeing self or other as valuable, feeling a sense of inner emptiness. I see this for a lot of individuals who are taking on those new levels of responsibility. They might feel an inner emptiness, or they might feel like something's missing in their life. If that's there, it's important to have that addressed. How can you fill that? Some people try to fill it with, I don't know about you, but I love chocolate. Maybe not as much as some of you, but I mean, I love chocolate. And I noticed before I start one of my group programs, I start eating a little bit more chocolate. Like, man, why am I eating so much more chocolate? Oh yeah, I'm starting up my next group program here in the month, and I'm exerting a lot of my energy. So I try to be helpful about it, and I buy vegan chocolate. Sometimes I go for the dark chocolate and the milk chocolate in those nice rare occasions. The point that I'm making here is you'll find yourself starting to feel some inner void or inner emptiness when you're exerting a lot of energy in the world. And so be aware of those times where maybe you indulge a little bit longer than you need to, or where you take, 3 or 4 pieces of chocolate. And by pieces, I mean the whole bar. So it's just important to be aware of when we start enacting that behavior. That's a sign that you might need to slow down a little bit there. And I'm seeing some more questions come up, and I'm just going to finish the slide and then I'll answer some of these questions. Number 3, depression. Future feels bleak or unlikely. Problems are viewed as caused by work. If you're feeling like there's no hope, then chances are you might be a little bit burnt out. And it's important to recognize here, sometimes a job shift is what's necessary. Sometimes a career shift is what's necessary, but other times it might just be a break. And knowing the difference between the two, that's really valuable. And that's something that we'll get into a little bit later on. And then finally, burnout syndrome or mental collapse, where you literally can't think, you can't take on anymore, and you recognize that there's nothing that you can do. You feel like you can't do anything. You feel like you can't keep up with the demands, and you check out and you close your energy off. And once it gets to that point, that's where we really need to start making some changes. And we don't want to get to that point. So I want to ask everyone here, where is it that you saw yourself in that whole 12-step model? And I encourage you, don't be shy. There's no judgments, there's no shame. Just I encourage and invite you to share with us where you see yourself at, maybe along that model. And there might be some areas, some of these steps, you might have one or two of them. It might not just be one. And while you're answering that, I'm going to look at some of the other questions here. Laura says, all the suggestions about being able to set yourself on busy or request that no one can interrupt. There's some, though, that we do not have the option. If we're in a call center where we are being timed and coached to cut calls shorter and take more calls, what suggestions are there for avoiding burnout in that kind of work environment? That's a great question. So, Laura, if you're in a call or a work environment, I would, and you have those deadlines, that's really a question of senior management. And I would invite you to offer that up to senior management and let them know, hey, I would be more productive and some more of my calls would be higher quality as opposed to higher quantity. You know, more calls isn't always better. That may be the logical thinking, but when it comes to call centers and making sales, it's really about the quality connection. And so I would talk to your senior leadership and share with them a strategy maybe that would allow them to see the value of having higher quality and less quantity. I'm going to go to Linda's question here. Have you tried a schedule for logging on or off for schedule? Okay, beautiful. Let's look further down here. Linda says, love chocolate. It helps everything better. Absolutely. I went on a chocolate tour over the weekend. And we got to figure out the medicinal values of cacao. And apparently cacao actually opens up your heart and allows you to perform better because you come from a more heart-centered space. I thought that was really interesting.
Jared, do you mind sharing the levels again? We have a few.
Absolutely. So absolutely. So right from the start, we'll just review these really quickly so you can see them. So it's first a compulsion to prove oneself, demonstrating worth excessively, working hard with an inability to switch off, neglecting basic needs, lack of eating, lack of health, and lack of social interaction, displacement of problems become dismissed, a revision of values are skewed, friends and family dismissed, and hobbies are irrelevant. Denial of emerging problems, intolerance, perceiving collaborators as stupid, aggression, and cynicism. Then we got withdrawal from social life, small, non-existent, odd behavioral changes, depersonalization, not seeing self as valuable or others as valuable, so feeling an inner emptiness. Depression or future feels bleak or unlikely, so the future doesn't seem existent. Oh, this isn't going to be good. I'm not enjoying my present life. What's the point? And then finally, burnout syndrome and mental collapse. And everyone, I just want to encourage you, if you're in any of these levels, this is a really good opportunity just to see where you're at or to see where you've been. And for everyone who's wondering, yes, you will get a recording. Yes, you will get a link to the recording as well as the PowerPoint. We'll make sure that gets out to everyone, and I'll link up with Josefina afterwards so we can get that out and get those resources. I'm going to read a couple more of the comments here. And if I can't get to everyone's questions, just for the sake of time, I apologize. Linda and I are going to set up a time for you to connect with us further so you can get those questions answered. We'll put that there with the recording and the PowerPoint as well too. So if I don't get to all of your questions this time, there will be an opportunity to have those answered and addressed in the future. I'm going to go to Julie's question here. She says, if you're at the higher levels, are there small tips like taking a vacation or logging off at the end of the day sufficient to dial it back? Or do you need a more severe intervention? That's a great question. So it's really up to you. Some people think that if they're in existential burnout, that they might need to take extreme drastic measures like change their career. But sometimes just a week off vacation or even 3 days can do it. It depends on how quickly you recover. Everyone has different recovery stages, Julia. So I would say that that's up to you to decide. I would say that if it's near the end, like depression or mental collapse, take at least 3 days off. Take at least 3 days off and then see where things go from there. And then if at the end of three days you still feel exactly the same, then I would say a more severe intervention needs to take place. So if you're wondering whether you're at circumstantial or existential burnout, take I have a 3 day off rule that I use, and that'll take care of about 90% of that people who have that question. So I encourage you to maybe take three good days off where you literally do absolutely nothing other than what it is that you just want to do. Allison says, definitely feeling the depersonalization. Beautiful. Awesome. Well, let's keep going here. These are all lovely questions. Thanks for opening up and sharing. Marie says, where's the chocolate tour? It's called Chocolate Kingdom, and they have 12 locations all around the United States. I was in Florida, though. It's really a great place. It's actually a really great tour. You learn a lot about how chocolate can actually keep us from burning out, because it opens up our heart space and actually gets the blood flowing. But that's not part of the presentation. So if you need some validation around your chocolate addictions, definitely go there. You'll get it. So let's continue on here. Linda, do you want to go into the misconceptions about burnout?
Yes, I will go into the misconceptions about burnout. And you've heard a few things today about how you're going to work incredibly hard, long hours, and you're going to sacrifice your health. That is not what we should be doing. There is no honor or badge or medal that we should get for doing that. So we shouldn't be doing that. And this one here, if you have passion, you have infinite energy. Passion only can take you so far. You have to rest and recharge and rejuvenate to be able to be at your best self. And if you think about the example that a lot of people give, and it's a very visual one, and I think it's one of the best examples out there, but if you are on an airplane and they lose the pressure, then the first thing you're supposed to do is put the mask on yourself. So, because you cannot help somebody else with you. The moment you go and help all the other people and you don't take care of yourself, you're no good to anybody. And that is a big problem. So think about the passion being similar to that. You can have a ton of passion, be really excited, and have an intentional focus. But again, if you're not taking the time to get moving, get out in nature, all these different things that you need to do, it doesn't matter how much passion, you're going to burn out. There's just no way around that. That's what's going to happen to you if you're not taking the time to rest. And that everyone has a job that reflects their purpose. So that's another misconception of burnout. And so trying to think of a good example around that.
Yeah, Linda, I got a good example that I wanted to share. So a lot of the times we think that our job has to be our primary purpose, and that is it. And I think what happens is individuals will think, well, if this job isn't fulfilling my purpose, then it's not valuable and it's not worth doing. The reality of it is our purpose exists outside of just our job. Some of you, your purpose may be to raise really amazing children who contribute to society, who contribute to value to the family. Other individuals on the call, your purpose might be to contribute a lot to the workplace environment. Whatever your purpose is, or whatever you've deemed your purpose to be, know that it exists outside of your job. I think a lot of the time there's some individuals, and I see this with entrepreneurs, and particularly they say that their purpose, their sole purpose in life is just their job. And if that's the case, that can lead to burnout. So we want to stay away from that type of thinking and recognize that our purpose is bigger than just our job. Our purpose is bigger than it's bigger than just our work. We also offer value to the world in lots of other different ways as well too. I'll let you continue on there, Linda.
Thank you for giving that wonderful example, because the moment we think that we are our job, or we are our job title, and that's not going in the way that we want, then we're going to be going down that path that you just talked about. And so we have so much that we can offer the world, and things that we want to do. And I like the one that you mentioned there about raising our kids to be contributors in society. How powerful was that? So anyway, I appreciate that ad.
Yeah.
And so the last one we have here on the slide is that personal sacrifice is necessary and defined. Well, personal well-being is held as less important. No, personal well-being is not less important. It is the important thing that we need to do. We shouldn't be sacrificing ourselves at all costs, because there's nothing that we have to do today that has to happen. There's always going to be that place where maybe tomorrow is going to be actually the better place to do that. And when we get to talking about ways to avoid the burnout, I'm going to speak to that one there. I have some tools that I personally use and that I love to share with everybody. And so we're going to be talking to how you don't need to do that personal sacrifice in order to get things out and done. There's a lot more things that you can be doing that are much more effective, and you will move quicker and faster when you deploy these things.
Beautiful.
And so the next one is, what is the difference between excellence and validation seeking? So Jared, would you take that one on for us?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's this misconception around work life where they say everything needs to be excellent, 150%, make it happen. It's really important to give a lot of value in our work. But if the value of our work is causing us to disregard our other life responsibilities, whether it's our family, with our friends, raising children, those hobbies that restore our energy, if it's keeping us from living in that way, that's not really valuable. And it's we don't want to burn ourselves out in the pursuit of excellence. Yes, it's great to be excellent. Yes, mastery. I'm all about it. I mean, my life, I'm always loving learning new things, and I'm all about mastery. But if we're constantly seeking validation, that's not helpful for us personally, and it's not helpful for other people. So what is the difference between excellence and validation seeking? Sometimes validation seeking can come in the form of dressed in excellence. It's like, no, I have high standards and I'm going to be excellent no matter what, even if it includes avoiding my family and avoiding the people that I care about, because I'm holding a standard of excellence. There's nothing wrong with being excellent, but we want to keep it in line with our value systems and in line with our other responsibilities outside of work. And so allowing ourselves to have high standards, that's what it's about. We want that, but we don't want to be validation seeking outside of ourselves as well. There's nothing wrong with having high standards. There's nothing wrong with wanting to show up powerfully for the community and our profession. But at the same time, if we're allowing it to get outside to the point where we're seeking validation from others relentlessly, we're setting ourselves up for a zero-sum game. And what I mean by a zero-sum game is we're going to lose, because that will never end. If you're constantly seeking validation through your job pursuits, or even for some people, it may be a relationship, that's an endless merry-go-round that you never stop off, that you're never going to step off of, and it's eventually going to lead to burnout. Does that make sense, everyone? That last point, I just want to make sure that that point there made sense. Awesome, great. Linda, do you want to take that?
Sure, and I just wanted to acknowledge one of the comments, and so it says, I prefer excellence of effort. Yes, the quality over quantity, that is definitely where you want to be, because you could actually be one of the people that have a lot of inputs going into something, and you have all this input going in, but it's not actually getting you to where you need to go at that moment in time. And so then you've overexerted what you were trying to do to get to that perfection. And so you're not getting any closer to reaching that. So thank you very much for adding that one there. So the question that we have for the group right now is, which signs of burnout are you having? Which ones, after listening to the 12 steps, we asked if you saw yourself in one or more of those categories. But there might be some other areas that, as we're having this discussion, that might come to surface. And so we'd love to have you share those, because chances are if you're having a sign of burnout, whether it's on the list or a +1, then probably the person that's sitting in our group here virtually is having the same thing. And, you know, when we know that other people are in that space having those types of things, then we can actually come together and be supportive, because we can't read people's minds. We can look for observations and see if somebody needs help. But until you maybe voice that you need a little bit of help, or that you're working through some of these things, and that you would actually open up and want to have this, then it makes it a little harder to get there. And so I really like how ICSCW, we're a body that is here to support each other. And that's why we're here today. And that's why I'm so excited to be able to talk to this topic, because I've experienced burnout myself. I've been around people that are for even the personal things. And so I just need to know that we're giving this resource to you today, and that you're going to like take hold of it and then start making those changes. So that way you don't have to stay in burnout. You can move away from that. And then when you see things coming on, you're going to know quicker and faster how to maybe turn that off.
Beautiful. Linda, I'm going to read Beth's comment here. She says she neglects basic needs sometimes. There's eating, breaks, physical activity, taking breaks, and social interactions. Yep, all those things, social interactions, physical activity, all those keep us from burning out. And it's important to have that, because if we're taking those breaks and given that, we can show up for our work, we can show up for our family, we can show up for the people that we care about, the work that we care about. We can show up in a much more powerful way. Beautiful. I'm going to go to Julie's question here. She says, when I ask myself if this thing that's bothering me will matter in 5 to 10 years from now, I find myself often saying or thinking, in the grand scheme of things, this doesn't really matter. Is that the dissociation part? That's a great question, Julie. So I'm going to answer that how I think that you're asking it. And if you could share in the comments there a little bit more of what you mean about the dissociation part. What I find is it's important to ask ourselves those questions. When I really care about this 5 or 10 years from now, because sometimes that's thinking futuristically. So I think that's really valuable. Sometimes I also think it's a way to be able to minimize the situation. So you want to ask yourself, am I really just minimizing a situation that actually needs my attention? Or am I really thinking about this in the most valuable way? Sometimes I see individuals who will minimize situations that don't need to be minimized and that actually need to be focused on. They'll think to themselves, I want to retire when I'm 65 or 70, but that's 20 or 30 years from now. So I don't really need to think about that. That's a minimization that isn't valuable for your plan of retirement, because you do want to be thinking about that 25 or 30 years prior. So I would need to know a little bit more about it. Where I see it goes wrong is sometimes people will not want to deal with a situation or challenge in that moment. And so they'll put it off to the future, and they'll make up an excuse in that moment. They'll displace it. And that's not valuable. So we really want to ask ourselves, am I just trying to avoid not doing what I know I need to do? Or is this something that I genuinely don't need to really be aware of, and that's not important right now? Because it could be one or the other. For some, it's no, you actually need to take awareness of this. Planning for your retirement, yeah, you need to be aware of that 25, 30 years ahead of time. But for other situations, it might be something that you actually don't need to take care of, and that actually really isn't that important. I'm going to go to Leslie's comment here, and then we'll continue and start finishing up. Leslie says, I've had some recent disappointments at work, and it really was the tipping point for my burnout. I don't have the resiliency right now, and these are really helpful steps for me to pay attention to and do more self-care, not seek validation from my work. Thanks for sharing that, Leslie, and being open and honest. And I think that's wonderful to share that. One of the biggest challenges that I see for individuals, and I mean, I get a lot of value out of my work, and I know a lot of you on the call get a lot of value out of your work, and that's a big passion and driving force. And that's a great value system to have. But if we're coming from a place where we get disappointed, or if we're coming from a place where we're not getting the validation that we want, that's where we need to validate ourselves and go inward. I always tell individuals, yes, it's great to have goals. It's great to make things happen. It's great to move things forward and hit new milestones in your career. But we're going to get disappointment. It's inevitable. And so when we get disappointment in our career or even in our personal life, that's inevitable. That's a human condition. We're always going to deal with challenges. In those moments where we get disappointed, we need to have systems of resilience set up so we can get recharged and so we can push forward. We don't have the option to give up on life. Life is always going to be happening. There's going to be markets shifting, market collapses. There's going to be job firings. There's going to be relationships that don't work out. There's going to be financial things that we didn't anticipate. That is never going to change. Life is always going to come for us. But what we can change is our ability to deal with life's challenges and become more resilient. And that means setting up resilient structures, setting up those right, working with a mentor, working with a coach, getting a support system, being a part of group programs that give you the support. All of you in this group have already taken those steps to being a part of this group. And I think that's awesome. The more resilient structures that we can set up for ourselves, the more enjoyable experience of our professional and personal life we can have. Before you go out in the cold, you don't go out in a t-shirt or with no clothes on, you put on a jacket. It's the same thing at life. We can take measures in our lives with coaches, mentors, programs. We can set things up in our life that allow us to become more resilient to life's challenges. And that's what this is really about. So beautiful comments here. And once again, everyone, if you have questions, I'm seeing a lot of questions and comments come up. For the sake of time, I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. I've put my email and my website. If you want to reach out to Linda and I, you can do it right through there. We have put that in the comment section. So if you have more questions or want to connect more, we've made that opportunity available. We put that right there in the chat section. So if we don't get to all the questions and comments, we have given ourselves some extra time so we can take care of those later on. Josefina, I just want to do a time check with you. How are we doing on time right now?
You both are doing great. We do have you until 10:30, so I believe you are on track.
Awesome. Lovely. Perfect. Thank you for that. Great. So let's continue on here. We got a few more slides and then we'll start closing it up, and we're going to give you time to come on camera as well and share questions live. So how do you actually avoid burnout? Well, number one is you want to keep your external values in check. We want to give balanced time with our families and hobbies. Remember, as you start getting into those deeper phases of burnout, as you start moving away from circumstantial and start getting closer to experiential and existential, that's going to make things a little bit more trickier for your life, and enjoyment's going to start going down. So you want to keep those values in check. Are you spending time with your family? Are you doing those things that you love? I see a couple of people, I think it was Allison, maybe someone mentioned that they're visiting Hershey, PA. They're actually visiting the chocolate factory. That's great. I love that. Make sure you schedule those trips in. Schedule them maybe 3 months out, 4 months out. If you're feeling a little bit burnt out and tired, put in those exciting trips. For me, I've been working real hard for the last 4 months. Linda and I have been getting our group program together, and we just started it yesterday. I scheduled a trip in to go to the beach for a little bit and eat some chocolate. That's my time to avoid burnout. So we want to put those trips in with our family and our time. We don't need to overdo it, but we need to put it in there. We need to have those things that we look forward to make life enjoyable. Number two is keep your physical health in check. Food and eating. Anyone notice here that when they start getting a little bit burnt out, they just give me food, or just give it all to me? Anyone do this? I like to eat a lot of smoothies, healthy smoothies, but I know when I start working a little bit too much, I can start seeing myself, reach for those Krispy Kreme donuts that I see in aisle 7 in Walmart. That's right. I have the aisle memorized. No shame. no shame, but it's all about discipline and willpower as well too. I see them like, oh, those Krispy Kreme donuts look well, they look enjoyable, but I'm going to continue to walk. I'm not going to tempt myself and buy them and put them in my pantry, because if so, they will get eaten. So we want to keep our physical health in check in our food, in our eating. It's really easy just to gorge ourselves. And I encourage you, if you can't find, if you do reach for unhealthy, or, you know, if you do reach for desserts when you're getting in that moment of binging eating or something like this, I encourage you to do it with something at least healthy. So you don't weigh it on your body. Like for me, I don't do it as much as I used to because I keep myself in check, but I remember sometimes I would binge eat, and I would binge eat on unhealthy foods. Now, if there's any type of binge eating that I see come up for me because I'm working a little bit too much, I tell myself, you know what, I'm actually going to do it with something healthy. I'm going to get like vegan water ice or a sorbet. I'll have two cones of sorbet water ice, or 3, and that feels really, really great. And my body doesn't feel so weighed down afterward. And then I'm like, oh, good, I can keep going. So if you can't resist the temptation to eat, at least eat something healthy and that's enjoyable, and something that doesn't weigh so much on your body. Number 3, keep your mental resilience in effect. Get a coach, support systems in place to counteract the negative feedback. One of the things that I see people do is they go into shame and guilt cycles. They are burned out. They reach for the Oreos or the Krispy Kreme donuts or whatever it is that you like to binge on. For some, maybe it's chocolate. I'm talking to myself there. Whatever it is that you like to binge on, just be aware of what you're putting in your body, and don't go into a shame. I encourage you, invite you to not go into a shame spiral, because that's what some people do. They'll go into a shame spiral because they think that the way that they can correct that behavior is if they shame and guilt themselves enough. You don't need to go into a shame spiral. It's easy to do that. I encourage and invite you to say, you know what? I just ate a lot of food that I didn't need to, that wasn't healthy, that wasn't good. That's where people go into the shame spiral. And then they say, well, you know what? I've had 1 piece of cake. Why not have 2 or 3 more? Anyone do this? I know we're guilty. I've been guilty of it. Anyone else do this? It's like, oh, I've already had 1 piece of cake, so I might as well have 2 or 3. I'm already in it. The shame spiral makes things worse. If you're experiencing any bit of shame, I encourage you to put that aside. Linda, I'm going to let you take care of the rest of this slide.
Okay, so I'm going to hop in here. I had some examples of some tools that I wanted to share before we moved on. And so some of the best things that you can do when you're trying to make sure you're not burning out is make sure you get that protected time. That's where you share with other people about when you're going to let them in, what and when that will be, and then say no to the things and people when they don't honor that. And then the other tool that I would like to put out there is that whole, when you're trying to figure out for your day, whether it's urgent versus important, that's one of the simplest tools.
Linda, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I think
sure.
On item number 4 that a couple of people are wondering about.
Oh, okay. So item number 4, can you take us back there, Jared?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, keeping your personal sense of purpose in check, doing your best, letting go of the desire to control, and allow room for grace and unfolding. Yes. Being able to identify your purpose and checking in to make sure that what you're doing is honoring your values. That's where it begins. So knowing your internal values, knowing your boundaries, and then making sure that when they're crossed that you're communicating them, but then also setting them in the beginning of what you will allow in, what you're not going to allow in, and then where that middle ground is. And the letting go of the desire to control. Yes, there's so many things in our external environment that we cannot control, and nor should we try. We should be trying to only control the things that we actually have the power to control. And so what's going on with other people, can't control other people, can't necessarily control the environment that you're in, but what you can control is how you're showing up in the environment, and trying to do the whole showing up to respond, not being reactive. And again, if you're burnt out, you're probably going to start getting reactive, and you're going to see that. So the moment you start seeing you're lashing out, lack of concentration, all of those things, then you know you've got to pull back in and start working on those items. And then really allowing the room for grace and unfolding. If you can't get anything else more out of today, that is like, in my world, I think that's the most important. Because there's times we are not going to do everything we set out to do, and that's okay. What's not okay is to continually stay on that path to be in the victim mentality and not be doing little things to get out of that. That's what's not okay. But it is okay to have that off day and to have that. And Jared talked to it, you know, instead of just eating the one piece of cake, you ate the whole darn thing. Okay, you did it. Okay, move on from there. And the same thing about if you were trying to get something executed and you just didn't quite get it done. You know what? Rest, because chances are the next day when you work in your space, when you're most productive, because we all have times a day where some activities are most productive, go and do it then. You know what? You'll probably find out that you'll get it done quicker and faster than if you had tried to keep on pushing and pushing until you reach that breaking point. And I will say it's so hard when you get into that momentum to want to shut it off and exit and be done. But that's the best thing you can do. And I think the number one way that you guys could all identify is that taking breaks. Because I am terrible about that. If I get into something and I want to get it done, I don't want to take the break because I'm going to have only so many hours. The best thing you can do is just say, you know what, I'm doing it, and just really hold yourself to do it. And if you can't hold yourself to it, get that accountability partner that's going to tell you, you know what, I'm going to save you from yourself. We're going to go and do that walk, or we're going to go and turn off, and we're going to go meditate. I mean, I've had some friends say, hey, you know what? We're going to meditate for 5 minutes and we're just going to do it. Feel so much better and more energized after doing that. So on that point, I'm hoping I'm answering your questions on that.
Yeah, that's great, Linda. And I do want to, there's a couple great comments here. I do want to say the test, try, trust is really valuable. I think sometimes I'll see individuals try to exert influence into a situation that just needs grace and unfolding. And that's really the strategy that I use. There might be times where you need to test and really push forward and try. And then there might be other times where you just need to trust and hold back. And I think wisdom is knowing, okay, yep, I need to move forward here. I really need to push through this. And then other times where it's like, nope, I just got to let it go. And I need to trust and see what falls into the space. And I think there's a couple comments here that I like. Amber, she says, I think it's important to recognize that there are toxic work environments, that the burnout is a check engine light to leave. Some situations aren't about how strong the coping methods are, but that it's a time to leave. I love that. That's exactly it. Sometimes it's you leaving. It's you exiting the situation. Sometimes that might be in relationship. Sometimes it might be in your professional life. Either way, knowing when to take action and get out of there, I think that's really important and valuable. And then other times it's just trusting, sitting back and saying, okay, you know what? I can't do anything more about the situation. If I continue to try to push this forward, I'm just going to burn myself up. So I'm just going to sit back. And I really think that's the wisdom there, is knowing when to test and continue to try and move and push. And then knowing also when to just trust and sit back. And when we can get a feel for that, our life is going to move in some really amazing ways. Beautiful. Let's continue on here. And if let's look at daily challenges faced by entrepreneurs. We have a couple more slides and then we'll be closing up. Linda, do you want to take this one?
Sure. And so one of the things that entrepreneurs or people in an organization can face is that whole loneliness. Now, loneliness is not to be confused with needing alone time or space to decompress, because you can go and be independent and go decompress. Loneliness means that you're feeling like you need other people to either energize you, make you feel like you're enough and that you matter. And And so loneliness is more about that being disconnected, whereas the other one is more about being in your space to recharge. And so that can happen, as a leader, it can be a lonely space because you are expected to serve others. You're expected to take care of the shop. And there's times where you communicate when everyone needs to know, not everything that you want to share. That one's a hard one. And that's when it feels the loneliness, where that one can really set in. And so in a self-employment review by Julia Dean, founder of the Cambridge Satchel Company, she found that 30% of entrepreneurs feel a sense of loneliness, which is different from solitude, which is just where I was getting to. And so know the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that in senior executive leadership a lot because they have so much responsibility. And, everyone who's on this call, I'm sure you have a lot of responsibilities, whether you're a mother, a caretaker, an entrepreneur, or at a high level senior executive leadership position. There can be times where it gets lonely, even if you're surrounded by people. And so if you're seeing any of that loneliness come up, chances are that you might actually need some solitude and just some alone time. I'm going to go to the next one here. Dr. Jeremy Noble from Harvard Medical School says that social connections are important keys to happiness and health. So it's really important to keep those that environment and those individuals who really fuel your life close to you. Sometimes I'll just wake up and I say, you know what, I'm feeling a little bit disconnected. I need to text my brothers and my sisters that I love them all, and I'm really thankful for them. And that's what I'll do. I'll get us on an all group quick text and I'll say, hey guys, I miss everyone. It's been 6 months to a year since we've seen each other. I just want to let you know I love you and I care for you, and I'm really looking forward to our family vacation in August, something like that. And just saying that makes me feel more connected and excited to start my day. Number two, and this is like Linda said, this doesn't apply just to entrepreneurs. It applies to senior executive leaders and anyone who's got responsibilities, and really just anyone who's a human being dealing with the unknown. The unknown is always going to be there. I think the slide just fast forward. Dealing with the unknown and uncertainty, that's a normal part of being human. No one saw COVID happening, unless you're psychic, but from what I know, no one really saw that happening. No one saw that was going to change our lives, both personally and professionally. Uncertainty is always going to be there, no matter what. Where I see entrepreneurs, people in leadership positions thrive is when they learn to trust themselves and take action, even in the unknown or the uncertain. That's what it's all about. So I encourage and invite you to do those exercises, those meditations, whatever it is that you need to do to get grounded into the unknown, get grounded into uncertainty. I wake up every morning, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who's going to cancel calls. I don't know who's going to show up for them. I don't know what's going to happen in the business. That's just a normal part of being human. But if we can ground ourselves into the unknown and shift our emotional relationship to the unknown, one that doesn't enact worry or fear, but one that enacts excitement and curiosity, you can go so much further in life. My relationship to the unknown and to the uncertain now is, oh, wow, this is going to be fun. What am I going to get? It's curiosity. Whereas before it was more of a fear-based relationship. Oh, I don't like uncertainty. I don't like the unknown because then I don't feel comfortable. So we want to ground ourselves in the unknown, the uncertain, and recognize that that's always an element at play, especially as leaders being in responsible positions. Beautiful. Linda, you want to take decision-making fatigue?
Yes. So here you see a graphic about decision. So you've got the quality over quantity. And so you get better decisions as you go for quality over quantity. And so anytime we decide that we're going to take shortcuts to achieve the results, then we're going to get tired. We're going to get burnt out. And the quality of those decisions is not going to be where we want it. So let's not take the shortcuts. Let's just focus on less and being quality and really moving the target that way.
Beautiful. Yeah, and just to add to that, Linda, I do want to say that with fatigue, I've noticed within organizations and senior leaders that as they make more decisions throughout the day, they tend to, the quality of their decision making goes down. And that's why you have people like Steve Jobs who wore the same outfit every single day, because he knew that he only had so much willpower throughout the day to make a quality decision. And one of the things that happens when we start getting too tired is we start acting impulsively and we start to actually do nothing. That they're both ways of actually saving energy. We think, oh man, I got, X amount of decisions to make and I feel overwhelmed by this decision. So, hey, why not just do this? Yep, that's what we're going to do. Just go with it. And then that can be a really big, there could be big consequences for taking shortcuts. Challenger, I don't know if you guys remember that rocket ship that blew up in the atmosphere within the last decade. That was because people were tired of making decisions and they started making shortcuts. So there can be big consequences if we don't keep our burnout in check and keep our decision-making fatigue in check as well too. The other way that we try to save energy is we just do it, nothing absolutely at all, or we displace it. I'm too tired, too exhausted, don't want to do any of it. I'm just going to put it over there by the wayside. So it's important to be aware of when we start seeing ourselves getting those decisions stacked up and recognizing how we try to avoid making so many decisions. They're both all ways to save energy. We either do nothing or we act impulsively because we're low on energy. What social psychologist Roy F. Baumeister, that's a fun name to say, what he calls it is ego depletion. Your mind only has so many decisions that it can make as we go throughout the day, and our ego gets depleted. So the quality of our decisions actually go down as we make more decisions throughout the day. So we really want to be aware of this and keep it in check. Who has some? Yeah. Linda,
I was just going to say, one of the tips I wanted to add here about this whole decision-making fatigue, if you're making a lot of decisions during the day, there's one strategy that I deploy that works really well, and that's figuring out the times of day that you're best in your decision-making and the times where your energy is not where it needs to be, and doing your decision-making during those blocks of time. That will increase the energy that you have to devote to making good quality decisions. So I just wanted to add that piece there.
I love that. Yep. That's a great ad. Well, I want to turn it over to the audience because we still have 8 more minutes here. And so I want to take up this 8 minutes to take out questions and conversations to you guys. What questions, what thoughts do you have from us? What insights are you having? Are you seeing some things fresh about your human experience, about your professional experience? What are you starting to notice? So I'm going to stop the screen share here and really push it over to you guys. Who's got some questions or thoughts or insights that they want to share that we can go into as a group? If you'll just raise your hand either visually or if you want to, if you look at the participants tab there in the bottom of the screen, you can actually just click on raise hand under the participants tab. So who here has something that they want to share or maybe ask a question, an insight? What do you guys got for us? I'm just looking throughout.
Looks like Dawn's raising her hand.
Hey, Dawn, good to see you. What do you got for us?
Okay, I unmuted. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for the presentation. I'm a paralegal and I work in a litigation unit, and sort of the problem that I'm having with burnout is that the work that other people do that they procrastinate in doing lands on my desk on the day of. It's got to be filed, and I'm expected to make it awesome and perfect, and file it and cross it over the finish line, and it's sort of adrenaline produce it, it provokes adrenaline kicks in. There's time constraints. It doesn't have, I don't have any technology failures built into this process, and technology does fail. And so this sort of constant dynamic it's just really challenging.
I got you, Don. Are you okay with me asking some questions and doing a quick coaching around this?
Sure.
So this is what I'm seeing. It's a managing expectation conversation. So clearly your bosses have a expectation and your coworkers have an expectation for you to show up and be a certain way that is causing burnout in your own life. What's a way that you could renegotiate those expectations that are being placed upon you?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. There's managing my internal expectation, which is we're just going to file something and it's going to be kind of crappy or, not up to my expectations of what it should be. Been doing this for 28 years, so I have some pretty high expectations of what the quality. It's a legal document. I mean, we shouldn't look like, it should be professional and correct. So I could manage my own internal expectations, although that's really hard. And the other thing is that I can have a conversation with the particular coworkers that are procrastinators, because we all know who they are.
Okay, cool. Yep.
And try to have some type of a conversation about how we can, I mean, it literally affects the quality of my life is
Absolutely.
the thing.
Absolutely. Donna, are the procrastinators affecting your ability to show up and deliver the level of quality that you have a standard for delivering?
Yeah.
Great. What conversations do you need to have with them in order to shift that? Because no one likes to have that conversation and say, hey, you're really holding everyone up. You're not doing well. Come on, let's get on the ball. Like, no one likes to have that conversation. It's not a comfortable conversation, but it's a necessary one because it's clearly ruining the quality of your life. So what's a way that you could have that conversation? Well, actually, how about we do, I think a role play would even be better. What's the person's, do you feel comfortable sharing the name here? And you don't have to, we can always use an anonymous name.
No, let's just say Joe.
Okay, so I'm Joe and you're Don, and Joe isn't showing up in the way that you need in order to deliver the quality of work. So let's role play this. Hey, Don, you had some things that you wanted to share with me. What's going on?
Well, we just kind of came off that last experience where we didn't almost make our filing deadline because the portal site crashed, and it was pretty anxiety provoking for me. And so I'm just trying to see how we can kind of build in some extra time so that we don't have to have a repeat of that. Because we need to cross the finish line on time, and I need more time in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, it seemed like everyone was scrambling last minute. It was pretty chaotic.
So, I guess what I'm asking is what would be really helpful from you is, instead of maybe getting me the product that still needs a lot of work the day of filing, perhaps you can get it to me the day before the day of filing. So 2 days before, so that we can actually really edit it, check the sites, get it to the quality level it needs to be. I can do my work. We can track change, go back and forth.
I thought I was giving it to you on time. I thought you had enough time, Dawn.
Yeah, it just wasn't enough time. I got it that morning, and by 4 o'clock, you and I were still going back and forth, track changing, and there were still blanks that needed to be filled in, and highlights and empty spaces. And at some point at 4:15, I just called time and said, we can't go back and forth, we can't do anymore, I need to file it. And then the portal was crashing, and I filed the last document at 4:58, and it was due at 5 o'clock, and I wasn't sure we were going to pull it off.
Got you, Don. So, great. So can we switch role plays here now? And so
yeah, because really what I want to say is your emergency product placed on my desk the day of, we all knew the litigation date was out there for 2 months,
right,
created an emergency for me that dramatically impacted the quality of my life and my work experience. And I don't want to go through that again.
Exactly. I love that. So that's perfect. Let's switch role plays and just see how I play you and you play Joe. Sound good?
Yep.
All right. Hey, Joe, can we have a conversation?
Yeah, sure. What's up?
So this isn't an easy conversation to have, and it's actually a little bit awkward for me. And I actually don't want to have this, but it's really necessary for us both to have a really good work experience together. Are you open to having this? And can we commit to staying in the conversation, even if it feels a little bit awkward?
Sure.
So last week, the last project that we had, I really just felt like I was in a boiling pot. It was an emergency. There were some things that were done at last minute, and it really ruined the quality of my life. And I didn't appreciate being in that situation. One of the things that I'm finding is that I need more time to have what it is that you give me so I can deliver the best high quality product. I really care about the level and the value of quality of what I deliver. And I also care about the quality of my life. And I've gotten some things from you in the past, and I'm not trying to come off as confrontational. I'm really just about sharing my needs here, because I want us to have a great work relationship and both of us to perform really well. What I need from you is I need this product delivered on time or ahead of time, so we can both look really good, do our jobs well, and so we're not caught up in an emergency situation like we were last week. What can we do together to get on the same page that will keep us from having that happen again?
Well, yeah, I appreciate you letting me know. I'm inexperienced, and so I really appreciate your review and your edits. Your work made the product much better and kind of took it to where it needed to go. So if that means that while I'm still learning this gig and how to do these things, I need to get it to you 2 days ahead, I can definitely work on doing that and commit to doing that on the next project. I want us to work together, and I really value the work that you do. And so I don't want you to feel disrespected in the process.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. And that means a lot to me. And I appreciate you being open and honest about being inexperienced, and we can help you with that too. And if I can help with that, just let me know. I just don't want that situation to occur again. So that really means a lot to me. And I appreciate you being willing to agree to that. And I'm excited to do some more projects and see what we can create together and see how we can really add value to each other's professional lives. All
right, let's go win some cases.
There you go. Cool. Awesome. How did that feel, Dawn? How did that feel for you?
It's hard. It's hard to have that conversation. And I'm really sort of a candid, open book person, and I really don't like to have to filter actually what I'm feeling and experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like I have to kind of filter what I'm feeling and experiencing.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it hard. You know, I went from private practice 28 years to state government. Private practice 28 years. I said to Mr. Maddox after 3 years of his procrastination, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. Either you get it to me on time or I'm out the door. He said, please don't go out the door. I love you.
Yeah.
You're valuable. I will fix this, Dawn. We won't affect this quality of life issue anymore. In state government, that's just really not.
Right. They can afford to get away with it, whereas the entrepreneurial world, they can't afford to get away with it. And I totally understand that connection. And what I found in my own personal experience dealing with both, Dawn, is that yes, I don't like to filter my communications as well too, but I follow the platinum rule. There's, the golden rule. Everyone heard of the golden rule, treat others how you want to be treated. I think we've all heard. That doesn't work too well. The platinum rule works better. And the platinum rule is communicate to others how they needed to be communicated to in order to make the connection happen so you can both do what it is that you need to do. It's a much more longer rule. And so while it may be hard to filter that, we have to filter our communication so that people get on the same page as us. And that will make our life easier in the long run.
Thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, you got it, Dawn. I'm glad you got a lot out of it. Everyone, I just want to say thank you for inviting Linda and I to be here. We really appreciate being here. It's an honor and a delight to be here and share the value of our experience in the professional world with you. If you have any questions, thoughts, insights, or deeper questions and insights that you want to share with us, we'd be delighted to hear them. I'm sorry, I know I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat and a lot of questions. We can't get to all of them for the sake of time right now. But if you do want to connect with either of us, I have attached the email and the link to the website in the chat box there. So I encourage you to do so. We'd be delighted to support you in any way that we can. And Josefina, I think the recording, the PowerPoint, and then the link, can we share that with you so that can go out to everyone in the group as well?
And we have one last thing. We want to make sure that everyone is aware that we are offering to all of you. Jared is being gracious and opening up his schedule. So if you would love to have a one-on-one personal coaching session with Jared, we are going to be giving out the Calendly link, and you can take advantage of that for the next week. And I encourage you all to do that, because that is where the value lies, is having that conversation with a coach where you can get those insights. And so we are offering that as part of our workshops.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both, Linda and Jared. I just really appreciate having this time. I think we are, since most of us do work from home, we are connected differently. And if anything, from what I've noticed, it's that people do appreciate that time where they are being heard, right? If they are going through something at the moment, they have that ability to show up and work their problems or work through anything that might be going on in their life. So ICSCW is hoping to bring those kinds of opportunities and tools for our membership, anyone who wishes to join us. So we do have both of you coming back in May. So if anyone wants to continue on this beautiful journey of growing and transforming, right? Especially to be able to be successful in the current times, please join us. They will be here again with us in May. So thank you both. We truly appreciate having you today. And we do have our recordings on Facebook. It'll probably take a little bit for them to be available, but they will be there. And since we do have the PowerPoint, we can distribute that and post it. We are working on our website at the moment, so I don't know how if we're able to post it online, but there is a way for us to give the presentation to any of you that attended today. So with that in mind, we do have a little transition for our next session, which is the subcommittee breakout session. So I will have Beth. Thank you, Jared and Linda.
Thank you, Josefina.
I will have Beth help us out with a transition into subcommittee work.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and open up our subcommittee breakout rooms. Each of you will be allowed to just choose which room you would like to join. There should be some options there. And then just click on it and it should jump you right over.
Beth, you have to hit like launch or something. I can't remember, or open rooms.
I did already.
Oh, okay.
Oh, maybe I have to broadcast. Nope.
The options are at the bottom. So if you click through all the participants, you can see the communications, legend policy, membership. So you have to scroll through this.
It looks like people are joining it, so the participant number is shrinking. Also, if you're having trouble joining one, I can assign you to a breakout room as well.
Yes, or if you are new and are wondering what the different subcommittees all about, also feel free to ask and we will tell you a little bit about each one and maybe you can join them for a little bit. Let us get situated. We do, like I said, we do want to be mindful of time. Our next speaker is Dr. Tana L. McGuire. She is a clinical psychologist working primarily with children and families. She was formerly the associate head of the Consultation and Liaison Division of Seattle Children's Hospital and was clinical associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the University of Washington School of Medicine. Specializes in the area of pediatric psychology and enjoys helping children and families who are dealing with the psychological impact of illness and chronic medical conditions. She has been involved in disaster preparation and response for 15 years, both in her local community as well as internationally, and co-developed the Health Support Team, a disaster behavioral health training, which has been used internationally as well as in the US. Currently, she is the behavioral health representative for the Disaster Clinical Advisory Committee, which plans for the impact of disasters on the regional healthcare system, as well as the State Disaster Medical Advisory Committee. Dr. McGuire is one of the lead for Washington State Department of Health's Behavioral Health Strike Team. Dr. McGuire, we are more than happy and fortunate to have you here today with us. Please feel free to take this time to share with us any wonderful knowledge that we can use regarding COVID and just anything that we can put into practice for our daily working, changing lives. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'll do my best. I want to make sure everybody can hear me and see my screen. If there's anybody who can't, yell. All right. Today, what I'm hoping to cover is just kind of what we can expect over the next few months, how COVID has impacted our behavioral health in general, which has not been by and large in a very positive way, how this shows up in the workplace and as in our personal lives, and then maybe some ways that we can mitigate the impact of that. So I want to define terms a little bit because these terms get used interchangeably. And I know you've had a session this morning, particularly around burnout. So this may be old news to you, but we like to kind of keep it clear. So burnout, exhaustion, just often coming from feeling like you have too much work and maybe not enough resources or enough control to do the kind of work that you want to be doing. Compassion fatigue, where there's an emotional component to that exhaustion. So not only are you tired and maybe feeling like you don't have enough resources, but you begin to lose your capacity to really care about what's happening with the people that you're having to engage with. So compassion fatigue can often come from having kind of a public facing job And it's neither of these are good things for people to have to deal with. Although I would venture to say probably all of us have burned out on a job one time or another during our careers. And then moral injury comes out of the military, combat in particular. And it is that those feelings of guilt and shame and anger often that come from being in a position where we feel like our values are being challenged in some way. So in healthcare, we've been seeing our healthcare workers in particular suffering a lot of moral injury dealing with this pandemic. So when we're in a situation where there are not enough resources to go around, you get close to crisis standards of care or into crisis standards of care where you have to decide who gets what kind of treatment. It puts healthcare providers in particular at huge risk. And then we're going to be talking about resilience because that's the piece that's going to get us through all of this. So this is a graph, originally comes from SAMHSA, and it is a way to describe the phases that are common in any disaster and how the behavioral health pieces kind of go along with those phases of disaster. We've had to modify this a little bit because COVID, unfortunately, has been a very, very long disaster period. But if you look at this graph and you see kind of over here, the impact phase.
Dr. McGuire, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure. Yep.
We aren't able to see I believe you have to press on the share. Are you currently sharing, not share, excuse me, the PowerPoint presentation so everyone can see it because it's not moving at the moment?
I am. So what screen are you guys on?
We are on the first, on the introduction page.
Oh, that's no good. Let's go back here. Sorry. Let's do.
Might be best to go ahead and stop sharing and reshare.
Let's do that. All right, stop share. I'm going to try this again. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. Let me move this through. All right, now let me try this again. Can you all see that one?
Yes, we can.
All right, can you see the new one?
Yes, ma'am.
Yay. All right. So we went through this and we're talking about the SAMHSA slide. Everybody can see the SAMHSA slide, yes?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Sometimes technology works. So I was explaining about this piece over here. So the impact phase of our disaster in terms of COVID was a year ago. So if you think about, if any of you are having an anniversary response to, we've been in this thing a whole year, this is why. And this is when the governor first started talking about shutting down the state. And we all kind of sheltered in place for a couple of weeks. And the behavioral health impact at the impact phase is often kind of just shock. And so the word I heard the most last spring was probably surreal. This is just so surreal. I can't believe we're in the middle of this weird thing, like a worldwide pandemic. Who would have guessed? And then from there, we, in any disaster, because we're a resilient species, we kind of move up into the honeymoon heroic phase. You know, we are doing our best to be creative, to cope. We start really problem solving. There's a lot of social cohesion. People are kind of working together to get through this. And you can see the honeymoon heroic phase often in the messaging, the media messaging that comes out right about then. You know, we're Boston strong. We're in this together. And then from there, in every disaster, no matter what it is, we go down, we slide down into this long disillusionment phase where everybody is tired. And we really want things to be back, as one of my colleagues likes to say, into the before times. And we're tired of living through this. And this disillusionment phase, this is when the behavioral health impact is the greatest. People are struggling the most. They're tired. The resources are getting slim, and all of us want to be done. From there, we had to actually mark out two different pathways because of the fact that the disillusionment phase of this disaster is so long. It's different than an earthquake or a hurricane, which can also the impact can last a long time, but this one has kind of been an unfolding of event after event after event. So, pandemic wave after pandemic wave. So down here at the bottom, as you see, we move out of the disillusionment phase. We think there are probably two paths that can happen. One is that blue dotted line at the bottom of the screen. And that may be where we are if we have additional impacts, if we have another disaster, if we have a lot of social unrest, any sort of extra event that starts us back at the cycle again. So if we do that, then we have again a second impact phase, a second honeymoon phase, and moving through, but it's harder because we're already tired and we've already been through this. And so the behavioral health impact is difficult. If the vaccine rollout goes well, kind of the stars align, we get a handle on this, then we're more likely to kind of move through that yellow line, moving up into reconstruction and recovery. And I think probably realistically, most of our individual behavioral health impact of all of this is someplace between those two lines. So when we started modeling this, when our team started modeling this last year, we really worried that we were being way too pessimistic. We knew what happens in disasters from the disaster behavioral health literature. We knew the population of Washington. We tried to kind of put together what we knew and what we might be able to predict. And unfortunately, the numbers have come right along. So what's astonishing about this is 3 to 4 million Washingtonians right now experiencing clinically significant behavioral health symptoms. So now that doesn't mean that people have major depression or an anxiety disorder, but it does mean that people are experiencing those symptoms at a level that it really gets in the way of their daily life. It kind of impairs their daily functioning. And that's about 40% of the population. And the truth of the matter is, if you think about and look at whatever statistics have been gathered across the country is kind of in that position too. It's pretty consistent across the country that about 40% of us are struggling, mostly with depression symptoms, anxiety symptoms, and stress. But that's a huge chunk of the population to be kind of going through this. Adolescents and teens are having an incredibly difficult time. And you all may or may not know that the governor recently made a declaration of an emergency declaration, in part because of the mental health issues that are cropping up in children and teens, which we've been following again for the last year. This isn't something new. We see substance use related issues go up in every sort of disaster. It doesn't have to be a pandemic. And we're seeing that happen in Washington now too. We don't think it's new incidents of substance use disorders. What we think is probably it's an exacerbation of people who are already struggling with substance misuse and are sort of doing more of that. And we've seen acting out and acting in throughout this pandemic in kind of a variety of ways. And right now, what we think we're seeing in terms of acting in and acting out with the pandemic fatigue that we're dealing with. So acting out are, you can see people who are just like, I'm done. I'm finished with this pandemic. I don't care what you have to say. I'm not doing this anymore. Don't ask me to socially distance. I'm not wearing my mask. I'm gonna just go about my business as though there is no public health emergency going on right now. And then we're also seeing acting in. So people who are feeling, particularly around this anniversary reaction, so hopeless, so low energy, they just have a hard time engaging with life at this point. And it looks like depression, but I think what really is going on is probably grief, that sort of heaviness, low energy, lack of interest in much going on. And if you think about what we've lived through in the last year, there's a lot to grieve. We've lost a year of experiences in many ways, lost a lot of connection with our family and friends and people that we love. Some people have lost jobs and their homes and all kinds of things. So it hasn't been, it's been a year to kind of mark in terms of things that we've lost. We are going to return to whatever our baseline level of functioning is in terms of behavioral health. And we think that most people are going to kind of turn the corner and really sort of break out into what would be our new normal in recovery and you know, in the response parts of it, probably late spring, early summer, which is too far away from me, but here we are. So these are the symptoms that are most common in Washington adults. This is what we're seeing is depression and anxiety. And just keep in mind that these things are not mutually exclusive. So you can't add these together. People who are depressed get anxious, and people who are anxious can get depressed. But this is the most prominent symptom across the board in Washington state for adults. And then we have people living through this disaster who already have gone through some issues. And let me just, if somebody doesn't mind monitoring the chat, I can't do that as well, but I would love to respond to whatever is, if there are questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. So we have people coming into this disaster with pre-existing trauma. So we have kids with what are called ACEs, adverse childhood events, which have a huge impact on their growth and development. So, you know, neglect or abuse. We have adults who have a history of a trauma. We have people who've already lived through a disaster of one sort or another. And then we have COVID. So dealing with the infections, with the death, with the isolation. And then we have the economic and political and social and educational for the kids impacts of that. So it's kind of a disaster cascade, if you will. So it's disaster on top of disaster on top of disaster. And then we know that some racial and ethnic groups have suffered these cascades with greater impact in terms of health, you know, disparities in health to begin with. And then when COVID hit, disparities in terms of access to care, rates of infection, rates of death, that whole sense of not only are we living through this disaster, but we're living through it under even more difficult situations. In our last month's forecasting, we were looking at this, and the highest number of people who are reporting serious symptoms of depression are people who identify as bi or multiracial, followed by people who identify as Black, and women expressing more distress across the board. So with depression, women expressing depressive symptoms at 39% versus men at 33%. And anxiety symptoms at 24% versus, or 27% versus 24% for men. So again, circling back to this compassion fatigue and burnout, what we want to do is to do our very best to avoid those, in part because, as you probably heard this morning, when people go through those, it can have a really tremendous impact on their sense of self-worth and efficacy. So we're hoping that organizations are keeping that in mind. And it sounds like the organizations that you all are involved with are really definitely bringing that to the fore and looking to protect their workforce. I want to call out general fatigue and exhaustion too, because sleep has been an issue throughout the pandemic. In the early stages, we heard a lot of stories about weird pandemic dreams. What we're seeing now are two kinds of sleep disruption that really have an impact on our capacity to function. So one is that laying there trying to go to sleep, kind of counting through the hours until we have to get back to work. The other, which may be a little more common, although I don't have numbers on it, this is anecdotal, is going to sleep just fine. And then about 2 a.m, waking up, with our brains very busy and our bodies not at all rested, thinking about things. And so just one pro tip is if you find yourself in that kind of sleeping pattern, don't get your phone out. You don't need that blue light to make the sleep worse. But do think about having a piece of paper and something to write with at the side of your bed and write down those things. I have them too sometimes when I wake up. I got to remember to email somebody tomorrow. I forgot to send this Zoom invite for a meeting next week. Whatever it is, write it down, and you may find that it will be a little bit easier for you to fall back asleep. So if any of you have seen presentations by the strike team, any of my colleagues, you will recognize this graphic. This is kind of our brain on COVID. And I want to highlight it because it really does kind of explain some of the neurology under what we're going through at this point. So if you look at this blue circle in the middle, this is the limbic system. This is the fight or flight threat assessment. This is the part of your brain that just reacts to keep you safe in an emergency. And if we were doing a brain imaging that we were looking at what was functioning instead of anatomy, this part of our brains would be lit up. We are kind of in this chronic stress, fight or flight, threat assessment mode, and we have been for almost a year. And unfortunately, when the blue circle gets lit up, this purple piece up here in the front, the prefrontal cortex, tends to go offline a little bit. It's not functioning as well. That's the part of your brain that helps you organize things and helps you plan things and helps you remember things like what day of the week it is. And it's the little voice in your head that says, maybe you shouldn't say out loud that thing that you're thinking in a meeting that you're in. So it's a bad combination. If you're finding yourself more reactive, like you're snapping at people, and that doesn't tend to be the way that you typically get through your day. And at the same time, you're more, maybe you're crying more, and you're struggling with getting your job done, which previously wasn't an issue for you. It's because our bodies are reacting to this incredible stress of living through a once in 100-year, we hope, pandemic. The other issue about having your limbic system aroused in a chronic way is that when that happens, your body is also producing all of these stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which is great. If you have a bear chasing you, you want all that on board. But having those circulate chronically leads to some really significant health issues. So it leads to fatigue and difficulty sleeping. It leads to pain often. So muscle pain, headaches, stomach aches, all those kinds of things. If you're struggling with those, you should, of course, get that checked out with your healthcare provider. But you should also know those are really common responses to living in a disaster. The other thing that having those stress hormones does is it suppresses your immune system, which in a pandemic is not a good thing. So my team jokes about not using this as a checklist for the day, but we have this slide because we want to emphasize the fact that when you're living through a disaster, the impact is on every single part of you as a human being. It impacts the way you're able to think and plan. It impacts how you act. It impacts the physical health of your body. It impacts your emotions, that sort of reactivity I was just talking about. You know, we find ourselves overeating, for example, and carb loading. Why is that? Well, we're trying to get our serotonin levels up because we're living through a disaster. My friend Kira likes to joke about getting a tan from the little light in your refrigerator because you're standing there with the door open so much. So just bear in mind that if you're struggling with any of these or all of these, it's because you're living through a very significant and stressful event. There is good news in spite of all of this. And the good news is that the most common long-term psychological response to disaster is resilience and recovery. Sometimes when we teach out train out our disaster behavioral health curriculum, we ask that question of our group is, what do you think is the most common psychological response to disasters? And people will often say, oh, it's post-traumatic stress disorder or, something like that. It's not. Most of us get through this all the way to the end and come back to our baseline. So that is good news. The other good news is that even if we aren't sort of innately resilient, we can learn to be resilient. These are skills that can be taught and practiced, and we can be intentional about them. Some people come into the world as sort of easygoing, they're flexible thinkers. They don't tend to be super reactive. They're kind of calm, but that's not all of us. So it's good to know that by focusing on some of these things, and we'll go into them a little bit more in depth in a bit here, we can actually increase our resilience to get us through this crisis that we're living in. One of the things that we're doing a lot of, our strike team, is training out active listening, because we think it's critically important for organizations, for everybody in an organization, to be good at this. And it feels weird, but the industrial and organizational psychology says that communication is one of the keys to having a resilient and successful organization and happy people who work in it. So this active listening is easy to describe. It's a little hard to get used to doing it on a regular basis, but the idea is just listen in the beginning. If you're the listener, don't interrupt. Don't think about what you're wanting to say in response. Just listen. And then try to get a sense that you understand this completely. You can ask questions, kind of, have this sense of curiosity about what you think you're hearing, and then kind of reflecting it. And that's the part that feels weird. You don't want to be like a robot. What I hear you saying is you're really unhappy in this job. But you want to reflect back what you think that person is trying, the point they're trying to get across. And you can be wrong about that. You might say, I think what you're saying is that this shift is not working for you in terms of, the other demands on your life. And the person may say, that's not what I'm saying at all. That's okay, because even just that process gives them the idea that you are really paying attention to what's going on. So if you get to the end of that process, and at the end, they ask you to help them solve the problem, that's the time to do it. But those of us who are helpers and good workers, we like to get right to the problem solving part. That's often not helpful. What some people need and want is just to be heard all the way through, and then they figure it out all on their own. So this is not intended to be one more thing to do, another thing to add to your list, but just kind of a summary of things that we know that go into getting us through this disaster and heading on to recovery. So being intentional about modeling those resilience factors, modeling that you're paying attention to your connections, modeling that you're focused on what gives you purpose in your job and in your life, that has an impact on the people around you. And then engaging in that active listening with colleagues and family, that increases the connection. So again, increases the resiliency. And it's not only helpful for the person that's speaking, it's helpful for the listener too. And then developing those healthy boundaries about work and personal time. And I think you probably have heard a lot of that this morning, but let me emphasize it one more time. It's really important. And I will say that for team leaders, supervisors, anyone in a leadership position, if you're not modeling what you're saying, it doesn't matter what you say. So, an example from being in disaster response is, I've had team leaders who've said all the right things, stay hydrated, make sure you eat when it's your turn, get to bed early because we're going to have 200 people show up at the clinic tomorrow. And that same person is sending emails at midnight, really wanting them to be answered before the 7 o'clock team meeting before the shift starts. It doesn't matter what that person says. The message that they're giving is you have to work all the time. If you're not working all the time, you're not a good team member. And therefore, you're not being helpful to these folks. So boundaries, 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 and walk the talk. Identifying little pieces of your self-care plan when you're getting through this. People that are good for you to talk to, don't pull the energy out of you, but sort of give you energy. If you're the sort of person that is not human unless she gets a run in every day, whatever it is for you, small pieces of self-care and building those in an intentional way. And then changing expectations given where we are. How are you doing at your job in the midst of a 100-year pandemic, which has upended the entire world and upended all of us in terms of our neurology and our psychology? How are you doing in the context of that? How are your kids doing in school, given the fact that many of them have not been able to attend in person, and that sitting in front of a screen on a Zoom meeting is no way for a 7-year-old to learn? How are your kids doing in the midst of all of that? It really is sort of an approach in terms of keeping it in perspective and cutting ourselves a little break in all of this. So when you're trying to have a conversation that is a problem-solving conversation, keep in mind, you know, the brain part, your limbic system. Keep in mind where you are and where the other person is in terms of their readiness to have this conversation. So this comes actually from the school literature for kids in terms of being ready to learn. Nobody in the red zone is in a position to have that problem-solving conversation. And having a teachable moment with your kids when they're in that red zone is like trying to teach somebody to swim who's drowning. Not going to work. So keep in mind, and this is sometimes a good thing to kind of post up in terms of family stuff. Keep in mind where you are on this. Are you ready to have this conversation? Is the other person ready to have this conversation? If you find that you're kind of winding up and both of you are ending up in that yellow or red zone, it's okay to take a break and come back to it once you've been calmed. And in terms of kids being ready to learn and adults being ready to have conversations and kids being ready to have conversations, both the blue stage and the red stage can often get reset into those, at least in the middle, green and yellow stages, by physical activity. So for kids, it might be go out and jump on the trampoline, or for you, it may be walk around the block a couple of times and then come back to this. We put in the anger and hostility model because we're all living in a pandemic where people are reactive, and there's a lot of anger out there. And it's a particularly toxic interaction to have with someone. And so if you're in a public facing position, you may be getting a lot of this because people have a hard time getting mad at a pandemic, but it's okay to get mad at somebody who, for example, isn't giving them the resources that they want or saying the right things, whatever it is. And if you're in a position where you're the helper or the public facing person, you're an easy target because you're not expected to respond in kind. You're expected to respond with calmness and professionalism. And that's part of what makes this such a difficult thing for us to deal with. So in the SAFE model, the first thing is to tune into yourself, being aware of the messages that you're giving. If you're in an in-person environment, what is your posture telling the other person? What is your eye contact? And in a virtual or in-person environment, how is the tone of voice that you're using helping to diffuse the situation or ratchet it up? The first thing to do is to kind of take a breath and get yourself centered down. So use those mirror neurons. We have monkey brains that like to imitate without even thinking about it. So for example, if I'm with somebody who's really kind of agitated and upset about something, and I slow down the pace that I'm talking with them, if I lower the register of my voice, if I take a couple of deep breaths, not only does it calm me, but almost instinctively, they mimic the same in themselves. So they may take a deep breath as well. So all these things can kind of get you back to the footing that you want to be in. And then again, if you're in a physical environment, an in-place environment, pay attention to the space around you. Are there people who can be available to you if you need them? Are there things around you that could potentially be used to hurt you? You know, get a stapler thrown at you. It's not a fun thing. And keep the exits in mind. It's kind of intuitive to think that I want to be next to the door because I want to get out if this person really gets kind of out of hand. But you don't want to put yourself in between someone who's upset and the exit. If you can both have equal access, that's ideal. But otherwise, let them go if they're going to go. That safety is kind of the number one priority here. And then try to think about what might be underneath what's going on with that person. It's very often that what's underneath all that anger is fear and anxiety about something. It doesn't show up that way because anger is just easier to express. But underneath what may be going on is something that really is terrifying that person. You know, I may lose my job if you don't do what I want you to do, or I'm losing my sense of self-esteem because, you know, whatever this interaction is that's here, I feel like I'm being disrespected in some way, and that really threatens me. So if you can keep in mind that the person you're working with may be kind of acting like a jerk, but underneath it, what may be going on is that they're really anxious about something. So again, coming from the disaster world, we were in Haiti one time and we had this community organizer, and he was kind of the gatekeeper for all the resources. And this guy came up, and I think everybody around him thought he was just going to get punched out. This man was yelling and very threatening. And this community organizer listened and listened and listened and finally said, show me. Walked over to the tent, saw that there was a tarp that was torn, and said to this guy, I see, you know, your kids are getting wet in the middle of the night and you're worried that, you know, they're going to get sick from that. Instant de-escalation because he had gotten to the bottom of what was going on. And then if you can engage and provide something, do that. You know, it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to the question that you're asking me, but I can try to find somebody to answer that, or I can't give you that, but I may be able to connect you with somebody who can give you what it is that you want. Small things can make a huge difference. And then engage in support for yourself. As I said, these are really toxic interactions. So they're not the ones that you want to keep to yourself. These are the ones that you want to find somebody, and it's usually a colleague, to just kind of offload with. I got to tell you this thing that I went through today. You want to not sort of hold that in. You want to unload that. Again, because your limbic system has been even more activated and the stress hormones are going, and you need to kind of get back to a calmer place yourself. So this is the resilience development exercise that we would encourage everybody to do. And because COVID brain, and we're all having a hard time remembering things, we usually recommend that you write these things down. I kind of go through this little exercise. What is it that motivates you? What is it that gets you up in the morning? What is it about your job that still contributes to some compassion reward for you? Think on a day-to-day basis and little bits. Don't think big picture. This is not the time to be thinking big picture. And then connection, which is hard in a physically distanced world, right? How can you maintain the connections that you have? How can you develop new connections to something bigger than yourself, even if not to, you know, perhaps another person? There's been some really creative things that have happened in the pandemic. I've heard of people having Friday night neighborhood happy hours when the weather was nicer, you know, sitting out at the end of their driveway with their favorite beverage and, you know, chatting across the way with their neighbors and actually developing better connections than they'd had before the pandemic. And then being flexible and adaptable. You know, what do you need to do to create that space between your work environment and the rest of your life if you're working from home? Some people take everything they have that's work related and put it in another room, so they're not tempted to check their email just one last time. You know, what can you do with your schedule? What can you do in any way to kind of keep yourself thinking about the options and being willing to consider other options? And then focusing on hope. You know, there have been some things in this pandemic that have been in some ways good for us. You know, the traffic is less, for one. We get to spend more time with our kids, plus or minus, depending on how the day is going. But there have been some things. Workplaces have become much more flexible. You know, it turns out people can work from home. So thinking about and reframing some of the hard things in this pandemic to the challenges that we have met and conquered, and we'll be meeting and conquering again. So this model is to remind you of, it's shorthand for what we've been talking about. So building in rewards for a job well done. I heard one story recently about a woman who has candy on her desk, and when she gets through a Zoom meeting that she really didn't want to get through, she gives herself a piece of candy. So small rewards, healthy rewards. If it's a glass of wine with dinner at the end of the day, one glass, not the whole bottle, one piece of candy, not the whole box. Boundaries, sharing your concerns, kind of offloading, and then trusting your team, trusting that if you get tired and you have to step back, that your team is going to step up and the job is going to get done and the sun is going to rise. No one is indispensable, even though it can feel like that sometimes. And trust that if your team member has to drop back because they're exhausted, you're going to step up and support them, and the job will get done and the sun will rise. This is the part that all those connections, if you're taking care of yourself, it takes care of your team, it takes care of the organization, and then it comes back around to taking care of you. Excuse me. I want to just point out some of the resources that are available. We have been training out the health support team training, which is a disaster behavioral health curriculum, to embed within organizations people who are willing to be peer supporters in kind of a more educated way. So this is a morning training. It's usually a 3-hour training, and it goes through those communication skills, recognizing when a colleague is in trouble, how to make referrals, skills to help manage those acute stress responses. So helping people to get calm, to kind of order their thoughts a little bit differently so that they're less likely to become depressed and anxious. All of those things, and then self-care as well. So if you have an interest in that, all these trainings are free of charge, and they're out there all the time. You can access them through the Department of Health. For any of you who may be in frontline healthcare at this point, we're also doing SciStart Responder. So that's a 30-minute training on how to do self-triage. Because it's not the distress that creates risk for psychological issues like PTSD. It's exposure to some events that are particularly difficult. So if you have an interest in that, all the models that I've discussed are available on our website. And, I will just say to you what I have said to everybody throughout this pandemic. Given this long recovery that we're in, there's some things that I would encourage you to consider. So I would encourage you to consider a media diet. There's very little healthy stuff coming to us through media of all sorts. So keep in mind where you're getting your information and how much time you want to spend on that. It's creating some real difficulty for us. Engaging in new hobbies or old hobbies, something to use the other parts of your brain. Pods, another way to maintain that social connection where you can actually get together with somebody that you know has been following the safety requirements and can be somebody that you can interact with in person. Getting outside, moving your body, engaging in spiritual practices that have been helpful for you in the past. Breathing, mindfulness, just hanging in there with whatever it is that for you is the thing that's going to get you through. If you have an interest in our monthly behavioral health forecast, which we put out to allow for planning purposes, here's what we think is happening in this phase of the disaster with data that we've gathered from Washington State. You have access to that. And then we do a weekly situational report, behavioral health situation report, kind of boots on the ground, real time. Here's where people are in terms of depression and anxiety and other kinds of issues. So I'm going to stop, and if you as the leaders of this have allowed time for questions, I'm happy to take them, have people unmute themselves or put them in the chat. Let me see if I can access the chat. It appears and disappears for me. Let's see, here we go. All right.
There haven't been any actual questions as of
A
yet.
lot of dialogue.
Lots of dialogue. Yeah, people, we love to chat with one another. Comments.
That's
Been
good.
really
We do
good.
that too on my team. Strange memes come through. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that that very first chart you showed with the normal process of going through any kind of a disaster,
Mhm.
that was very, very interesting. And I find that's so true. It was just really good. I had never seen that before. I really appreciated you sharing that. Give some real perspective.
Good. It is true of every disaster. It's funny in some ways, but tornadoes, acts of terror, whatever it is, people go through the same process. So
I find that this is also just the same process experience for any kind of a trauma situation as well. We had a home invasion that took place at our house in November last year, and we have gone through all of this. All of those feelings have all been there as we've walked through the PTSD involved with that.
yeah,
This is very interesting.
yeah, that's horrifying. I'm glad you're getting through it. I see here somebody had asked about slides. Yes, you're welcome to share the slides. I think you probably got a copy of the slide deck, but if not, I can send it to you. Yes, and we are all experiencing COVID brain. The most common response I get when I give this resilience talk, and I have done it a number of times, is, oh, I thought I had developed early onset dementia or adult onset attention deficit disorder in some way. You're not. This is just part of COVID brain. We're developing a hashtag for it.
Dr. McGuire, I have a comment and a bit of a question, and I know there was a comment related in the chat regarding how do we do it when we quote unquote go back, right? Like, how is there anything that we can do? So that's one. And then two, I am Hispanic, so I was very happy to see that you do mention the fact that, that is a group that gets exposed more. So just any resources that you can point us to for any of that we can provide, not only to our members, but any other state employees that are interested in knowing.
Sure. Well, I think just knowing the facts and the data is helpful, and it needs to be kind of brought to the forefront. I'm hearing more and I'm seeing more in all of my interactions of people who are recognizing that there have been some incredibly awful disparities throughout this pandemic, and we have to address those very directly. In terms of kind of entering the new stage, it's good to think about that and to plan for that, because in your workplace, even though you may not have been identified as a disaster responder, we all of us, having lived through this year, in some ways are responding to the disaster, right? There's a different pace. There's a sense of urgency, like we have to get things done. So we've been on a response pace, and that has created a lot of stress. It also creates this sense often that our work is really meaningful because we're doing it in the midst of and in response to this pandemic. When that goes away, some of the stress will go away, but we also make this shift back into our old jobs, the things that we have, we used to do in the before times. And there can be emotional responses to that demobilization. It's like being on a response team and then being demobilized. So missing that connection, that sense of, increased purpose in our jobs, because we're doing it under these difficult circumstances, and the kind of sharing that goes on among teams when they're doing that, and back to the old normal can have, so if you're finding yourself as you're going back to the old normal, more irritable, feeling kind of down, sort of let down, having a little less energy, just pay attention to those things. That's the time to engage in those self-care practices that I'm hoping you all are engaged in. But there really is there's literature on that too. You know, people have studied that whole demobilization coming out of the other side of a disaster. There's a response to that as well. We're going to be talking about that in some of our new guidance material.
All right, Dr. McGuire, I don't know if we have any more questions. We do have thank yous, and just we're so grateful that you were able to be here with us. And I feel fortunate. I think every time we meet in this space, I think there's nothing but appreciation for the resources we have and the people that we have that are able to be out there and just doing their best. So thank you for coming here and showing us a little bit of the work and the resources that we can use in these difficult times.
Thank you. And thank you guys for doing, you know, clearly there's this connection within this group. Thank you for building that and paying attention to, you know, the health of the people among your work groups. I think that's amazing. Really appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good rest of your meeting and rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right, everyone, we are getting close to concluding. I do want to make a couple of announcements. We do have today's meeting. The Washington State Women's Commission was sponsoring the meeting with us. We are doing our best to partner to carry our efforts forward. The Washington State Women's Commission, I will type their info on the chat box. They do have a panel coming up. I believe is to celebrate woman, which is always wonderful. So let me type it in there in the chat, and it is this week. If you have time and can attend, feel free to attend. And then I would like to thank all the board and all the members that have helped to put today's meeting together. Without that wonderful effort of everybody, I don't think we are able to bring this wonderful, the wonderful speakers we had today. And just stay tuned for other opportunities that we have coming up. We do have a meeting May 18th. And as soon as we have an agenda, we will be sending it out. At this point, if anybody from ICSCW has anything to say, please feel free to speak or share it in the chat box. Otherwise, we will be concluding. We do have our board meeting at 1, and anyone who would like to attend that is free to attend it. You are more than welcome to take a little break, which is what we're gonna do, and then join us back up again at 1.
Is it the same link for the 1 o'clock meeting?
Beth, did we decide on this one that we are staying put?
Yeah, we're gonna just use this same meeting
Oh,
for
perfect.
that.
Yeah, so we are staying put for the meeting. We're just taking a break.
And this is just for the members, right?
Anyone can attend if you want to see. It's open to the public, so feel free to stay as long as you want. It will last about an hour and a half.
Okay. I only blocked this morning for this meeting. I didn't know it's in the afternoon as well.
Yes, and
The afternoon meeting is our executive board meeting, so it's
Okay.
not the normal
Perfect.
membership meeting, but anybody's welcome to attend if they'd like.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thank you.